Welcome everyone to the Retrospective Engineering Leadership Podcast with Jeremy and I, Peter. We are starting our third season and we are focusing in this season on usable, self-contained engineering leadership content. The idea is that just like we did in the previous season, we are selecting one topic for one show, try to keep it short and discuss all aspects. So with that being said, Jeremy, what do we have for today?
It's great to be back for our third season. And today I wanted to talk about task-relevant maturity. It's a concept that's helped me a lot, and it's a concept that has also allowed me to help others as well.
Cool. Let me play the reporter. What is this task-relevant maturity, Jeremy?
Well, actually, maybe before we dive into what it is, maybe we can talk about some of the challenges that managers face. So one of the things I've seen with brand new managers is, and often companies are promoting someone who's very strong technical, who's sometimes often the maybe one of the best engineers in the team. Not the best pattern to choose either. But what ends up happening is that those new managers end up micromanaging everybody in the team. They slice up the work and they dish it out and they plan all the stories in advance. And when people are doing the work, they can run into issues with their team members because we're talking about knowledge work here, and people don't like being micromanaged. At the same time, you also have then some people who are totally the opposite. They are totally hands-off, and then things go off the rails, or people get stuck and the work doesn't progress. And then you have the worst combination of all, which is where you do both, where you throw stuff at people and then you kind of dive in later and micromanage them. I guess the problem is how do you adjust your style to get the best from the people in your team?
Yeah, and just to add to the worst challenges, I also so often that perceive seniority of the person and say things like, you're already a staff engineer, you're a senior engineer, this should be natural for you, and just expecting the same level of, being comfortable and being able to perform quickly on a new subject just because of their previous achievements or experience.
Exactly. And it's a challenge. And by the way, it's funny, we talk about these concepts like we know them really well, but often I have to be reminded myself as well. I think we all regularly fall into traps, around how we manage, how with particular people we connect in different ways and all the rest. I feel like this is a tool that can help a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. And even the framework, thinking about what you will explain later, how to identify when to use this tool, how to assess someone's task-relevant maturity, and then knowing that this assessment means that the approach I should take is more hands-on or less hands-on. That's a very useful framework that can be used in the day-to-day.
Exactly. So let's dive into what is task-relevant maturity, because it's a weird way to call it, weird name. It's not necessarily directly obvious in one sense. So the origin of it came from Andy Grove. Andy Grove was one of the famous tech CEOs of all time. And he was the CEO of Intel, but Intel's a company that's struggling now, but he was also the reason why Intel did so good and was in a dominant position. And he wrote a book called High Output Management. And this is one of the concepts from the book. And essentially, it's a very simple concept. Instead of, you talked about senior people and junior people and so on. And instead of having a specific style for senior people and a specific style of managing work for very more junior people, graduates and so on, actually his point is that you need to adjust your style of managing based on both the person and the task that they're going to do. For example, let's take something super simple, like you have a graduate and you're asking them to do a fairly simple task and they're capable of it, like maybe send a weekly email about what work you've done, and you might find that graduate is actually entirely capable of doing that. You might find that someone senior is actually struggling much more to do that. So you've got to adjust. The key insight on this framework is that it's not by person, but it's really about the person and the task combined together. And he identifies, like, based on their maturity to do a specific task, you adjust your style, either have like pay higher attention and coaching and so on with them, or you back off and you have lower management intervention in what they're doing.
Yeah. I like that, because when I'm talking about delegation with people in my teams, when I'm managing managers, I always describe them as like a balance or a slider where you adjust the slider based on how much, well, a lot of stuff based on the person's task relevant maturity, the level of your trust in the person and their execution. And this is where it comes in, that it's not just the task, it's the person also. And maybe you take a different adjustment based on the task itself, because if it's a critical, super high profile task, then maybe the person would do an okay job and it would be a great learning opportunity. Maybe you would adjust the slider to be more collaborative and less autonomous for them because of the risk of the task.
Yeah, and one of the things that I often miss, and most people miss even when they are familiar with this concept, is actually having a discussion up front with the person about this specific task, and having this language of task relevant maturity not just be something it's theoretical that you as a manager know and they don't, but actually introduce this task in the team, in your conversation. And then you say, okay, for this task, where do you feel like you need me? That it's a game changer to have that conversation up front because then you agree a level together.
As we started, this is not about the person, it's about the task. So what it does is it removes the responsibility for the person. It creates a safe space for the person to say, I'm not comfortable in this task. This is new to me. And this is not going to be about their performance. It's going to be about their task relevant maturity. I love this idea.
Yeah. And then, talk about then, what does that mean? Like how do you then respond as a manager for different levels? If the person has low maturity, then as a manager, you need to give much more structured guidance, really, really clear expectations. I think the majority of the time when it goes wrong is you haven't, as a manager, articulated clearly what it is you're actually expecting. That's often where I see things going wrong. And to be honest, even on different levels as well. But it's also about the frequency that you then check in with that person and the level of feedback that you give to them and the kind of going back to the expectation, like what's the success criteria? What does good look like? Work with them every day, just seeing that the tasks are moving and so on. And I think that's the number one thing. This is not micromanagement, but it's really specifically agreeing the level and then going to the level that helps that person be successful in the task.
Yeah. Even when hand-holding or collaboration is useful and required, like in these cases, micromanagement is such a bad word to describe it, because what it says is basically that the other person is just a clumsy tool that I'm trying to operate things with that through this person. And that's really not what happens here. As you said, it's about helping to structurize the task, making expectations clear, and being a bit more prescriptive and giving them a little bit less autonomy, so they get back to closer to their comfort zone.
And one of the things I found that on this particular one, it can surprise you, but you might think that the person has an understanding when you explain your expectations. But you often, I think the mistake that the person didn't actually get it, and you'll see the signs as you start to see the work being done. And instead of, I think one of the things that we would then do wrong is our feedback, we can get frustrated. The feedback comes out wrong, because it's very time consuming as well. I think go back to the point of what are we trying to achieve? Why am I asking you to do this? Why in this specific way? What did I not explain to you, or what did you not understand when I explained it to you? So I think think like most of the people we work with have some level of competence in the job. We interview for it, we hire for it, and so on. So I would say that often it's a misunderstanding of the why or the reasons for specific things.
But here's the thing, like if you're working with someone who has a low task relevant maturity in an area, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to provide the extra information. Maybe it's going to trigger you as a manager to pair this person on this single task with someone more experienced in this area. And then you can, optimize your time a bit better and delegate in a different way. So it's just about that person needs a bit more collaboration on this task.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as you move up to someone who's kind of, maybe it might actually be worth talking about like where someone is high task relevant maturity before we go
that's
to
easier.
the middle, because it's easier to go to the extremes. So I would say someone who, feels like, yeah, I get it. I know what I'm doing here. You're agreeing together the high level objectives. You kind of run things. They're going to be kind of independent, and they should be very independent. I would say that someone who has a high task relevant maturity is also able to know when they're stuck and know how to ask for help on the task. And
very important.
Yeah, I mean, and we obviously talked about that in the past about senior engineers and what it means to be senior and so on. But I think like here, what you want to focus on is providing the business context, because as a manager, maybe you have more of a context around what's going on in the business that they may not have. I think setting in place some kind of gates with the person, where you say, hey, can you, when you're planning the project out, can you show the milestones that you're planning to do and so on? What time boxes will you have? I think having a discussion about it's more of like a peer discussion about the goals they've set or the key technical points that the decision points that they're making. So you're more partnering with them.
Yeah. And just as we said in the other extreme, maybe this is a case also where it's not me who's gonna, validate and collaborate with the person, but maybe a principal engineer from another team, maybe a product manager. It can be anyone else. Yeah.
And I think the mistake or when things go wrong is where you fail to provide more of the strategic or business context to because you're often, as a manager, you're more plugged into more of the wider things, and part of your job is to do the stakeholder management wider within engineering and inside the company. And it's making sure that this individual contributor understands those things. Those are the constraints, because it might, and obviously this is also a conversation with the product manager. Maybe we don't need all the bells and whistles, but we need to ship something now to win a deal, right? That context can make a big difference.
It's all about making it very clear, not necessarily what we are developing, but why the person really understands and can make those decisions. It's interesting that you call this out as a big risk, because I saw another big risk. This is more about trust, I guess, when the manager recognizes that the person can have a high level of autonomy and they delegate the task efficiently. And when the developer comes back with a solution, it's different from what the manager would have done. This is really a hard situation, because, there are no prescribed solutions for everything. But once you give, I guess what I'm telling to my managers is that decide if you're going to trust the solution from the person. Make sure that if you have some kind of internal acceptance criteria, make it explicit. Don't assume these kind of things. And if within those criteria he comes back with a different solution, then be happy with it. There's a good chance they chose a better technical solutions because they are more technical. But this is very hard for some managers, especially hands-on managers, when they are very close to the code, where they are very close to the tech, and somebody comes with a solution that's different than theirs. It's hard.
Yeah, I think the risk here isn't about the risk of dealing with the person and their thing going wrong. It's actually what goes wrong inside you when they present their solution. In this particular situation where you have high task relevant maturity, as you say, the biggest challenge is allowing that to happen. And
Exactly.
the worst thing you can do is say, I don't like that solution. Don't do it that way. Do it this way. You know, what I would, so this is a learning that I've had that I still fail at doing, but when you have that moment of like, why are they doing it this way? I would never do it that way. Turn your solution engineer brain off and ask questions. Did you think about this? Why did you not consider this option? You know, and, you know, I had this other favorite library that I really like. Why didn't you use that? You know, or this tool or whatever, or I came across this thing somewhere else. And either they actually did consider it and they give you a logical reason, or maybe not. And then you have a conversation. But the moment you impose your solution back down on them, you break everything. You break the relationship and you break their motivation, and it's super toxic. It's the worst thing you can do to someone.
Yeah, because it essentially says that initially I told you that I trust you, but joke's on you, I don't trust you. And that's not a good. In these cases, I tell people to, well, be transparent, index it down a bit, say that I know that you have all the skills to do this. Maybe it's my fault, but this is an important project for me. Let's work a bit together, at least on the first step, so we can discuss all the details, and you dial down a little bit the delegation, knowing that this might not be ideal, but you need to take into account your level of trust with the person and your level of comfort if the solution is different from what you would have chosen.
Yeah, and I would also
but do it initially and do it transparently. Sorry, so don't do it at the end, and don't hide these.
Yeah, and I would also say, like, when you plan and you see that, oh, that's a different approach, agree earlier tests of the strategy to de-risk it, work on the milestones around what's being done to, if you feel that maybe your experience is telling you that it's maybe a different way would work better, just put in some checkpoints for the risks that you see about their solution. In fact, then what you're doing is instead of undercutting them, that's a great idea. I think there could be some risks with that. Let's de-risk it by doing these things. So much better.
Yeah, but a lot depends on the details. It's easy to come across as micromanaging, as we said. So you should really have a transparent, trust-based relationship with the person, so they don't assume that you're just hiding that you're going to micromanage them anyway, and the task you're posing is just a quiz to find out what the boss would have done. So
exactly.
Don't do that.
I guess the hardest thing about high task relevant maturity people, especially people who demonstrate that consistently for many, many tasks, is you push them out of the org eventually because you don't give them the right level of autonomy to do what they need to do. And when they leave, they'll say, I felt I was micromanaged.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's like, do you want to talk a lot about the middle? Because I have some other questions about assessing, and I'm not sure what advice we can give at the middle, but let's jump into it.
But for the middle, you're more focusing on coaching. And I think you need to be ready to adjust your style up or down, depending on how it kind of starts to pan out. You're often focusing more on, let's make sure we get the high-level architecture right, and then when we can work together, or you have someone else work with them, and then they're often able to do the execution. It might be that they need a bit of help structuring a few things, but then in the actual detail, they're okay. I think this one is really hard because you need to adjust up or down your style constantly. But I think, like, as long as you have regular check-ins, they're not going to be daily. I mean, you expect this person in the daily stand-up, if you have one or whatever, or however you should see status being updated on a daily basis, in my opinion. That's a warning sign for anybody when that's not happening. Yeah, you might just have, like, every week they're going to turn up and do a demo, right?
Yeah.
Or so on. So this one's tricky, but usually what you're doing here is helping them how to unblock themselves, coaching, like, you should go and talk to this person, I think they're, etc. It's helping them with their network in the company.
Yeah, I guess the tricky thing in this situation, being in the middle, is that it's hard to plan far ahead. You need to be flexible of changing your approach almost at every interaction. Maybe on Monday you plan that this guy has it and I don't need to pair with them during the week, and Tuesday you find out that's actually not the case. You spend half of Wednesday on pair programming with them, explaining some concept that you assume they will know. So
yeah.
But I find that, well, first of all, I think most people are in the middle somewhere, so
Yeah, exactly.
Extremes are rare, so get familiar with it. But on the other hand, I really like it because this is the place where I think the most growth can happen, because the person is not super lost and they are not peaked neither. They are ideally they have some good momentum and they are learning something.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to segue to what we should all be trying to do here, which is helping people move up the levels of maturity. So if you do it once, maybe the next time you're much more capable of doing it with less help. And the number one message for managers is one size fits all management style does not work. Don't do it. Start getting good to asking questions of your most experienced, capable people. Adjust your style, go, and have the conversation up front. And even like I think the key thing here is we talk about spotting signs when things go off track, but the key thing is it's not a one and done conversation. It's you do it in the project. You can do it during the project. You can say, we talked at the beginning about like how we would work together, but I feel like you're really struggling here, and maybe we can meet a couple more times a week to see how we can unblock you.
Yeah, or the other way around. Like I expected to have a 4-hour session with you where we discuss the framework, and actually I had the idea that maybe you don't even need that. And yeah, I guess what we could a little bit talk about is how to assess someone efficiently and effectively. I really liked that you started out with just be transparent and ask the question from the person how comfortable they feel. I'm wondering if you have any other tips or tools or anything that a manager could use to assess the task relevant maturity of an individual.
Well, I think like if you have someone who has done the task a million times, then you kind of, you can, how do I put this? Because you can end up having a situation where they do it a million times, but they do it really badly all the time.
Yeah,
but in general,
I'm
going for that. You've done it a lot of times. You kind of you just know they're going to do it well, and So the thing you shouldn't do is just say, this is a senior person, I have a one size fits all style with them. And so I think part of being able to assess is having a trust-based relationship with people where they feel safe to tell you when and I'm struggling, I'm a bit stuck or whatever. But yeah, I think I think the other bit of assessing is when you sense that things are not going well between you and the other person on a project, and you're like, why are they kind of getting upset with me? And is it because I'm like all over them? Like I gave them a lot of feedback on this document, and I told them that I really wasn't happy with the approach they took, and then they gone a bit dark on me or whatever. Like that's a sign that maybe you need to adjust your style.
Yeah. That's actually a good approach. I would say that trust your instincts. Like you're the manager of this team and of these people, and you know them. So trust your guts, but only set the initial level. As we discussed, this can be adjusted during the project. So find a good starting point. Like I believe this person has a very high task relevant maturity, so I'm just gonna explain the requirements and watch their reactions, what kind of questions they ask, everything. And even during that discussion or the next one, you can balance it a bit more down, or start from the other extreme and watch out for signs. If the other person feels that you're telling them stuff that they know, then adjust it. But yeah, as you said, not treating it as one, judgment and keeping to it, but keep on adjusting it, being flexible is important.
I think the other important thing to note is that as a manager, you don't just manage the people and dish out the work and stuff. You, to some extent, you actually manage the system of work, how people work in the team. You know, the dailies, the retrospectives, and so on. And so what you also need to think about is, how do I adjust the system of work in the team to catch when things are going off track, and to help people have that level of autonomy? How do I pair people up in their work? And, you know, I think there's a lot of controls that you can do. And if you put in, I don't mean controls in a kind of like micromanaging sense. I mean like little checkpoints, like stand up, you know, like in the stand up, show the Kanban board or the sprint board of the team and say, hey, this one hasn't moved, you know, like use it as an opportunity to use visual management to highlight the things where things are going off track or not. And you have a lot of influence in how you run the system in the team to spot where things are going well, where they're not going well, and so on. And I think that control of the system of work is a way to also assess if the maturity is right or not of a particular skill.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. I have a last question to you. Usually we as managers, we want to ensure that people in our team are growing in their personal careers, and most of the learning is happening outside of someone's comfort zone, where they can be free to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes and everything. But oftentimes we get projects that are super critical, and we cannot allow any kind of delay because somebody made a mistake. How do you balance these two needs of having to, you know, deliver appropriate, good outcomes and ensuring that people have the safety to make mistakes and learn from it so they can grow?
So the number one mistake that managers, especially hands-on managers, make is they do the thing themselves.
Yeah.
So don't do that, but be like close. I think for critical path stuff, first of all, have people work together, you know, really important stuff. I think we talked about, you have management judgment, you know.
Yeah.
I have this person, maybe that's a great challenge for them to prove themselves. Like they're going for promotion, they're looking for those opportunities. And so you sit down with them and say, hey, this is really important, but I think you can do it. And I'm gonna sit with you, and I might be a little bit closer, but I'm just trying to make sure that, you know, because this is really important. Tell me if I'm too much. You know, you can have these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And then you can adjust your style depending on how it's going and so on. And in some cases where it's really critical, you might have a weekly meeting with a customer, a weekly meeting, you know, with internal stakeholders, the boss's boss, the CEO or whoever. So you know, like you might need to provide a little bit of air cover for the team, especially if someone's not used to it. But I would say like you kind of use those still as an opportunity to grow people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you nailed it in the beginning when you said pair people, because I found it so powerful. Like working together on a single project, pair programming or even mob programming, this is so beneficial for the more senior and the less senior people too. And it results in better quality software also, because there are more people catching problems. They can argue with someone. They don't need to keep their assumptions inside. And yeah, I really like that as a tool to balance execution, you know, high risk projects and personal growth.
Yeah. So yeah, nice. I think that's what I wanted to cover. You know, basically, as a manager, adjust your style based on the task that people are doing. Don't just have it adjusted for each person, but actually for what that task is, what that person is doing on their task. And the more mature they are, the more you ask questions and the better questions you ask. And the less mature, maybe you can be a bit more directive. And in between, you use your coaching skills to move people up the levels.
Yeah, awesome. Just one more thing to add, to re-emphasize, because I love this. It's not always you who has to be the person who gives them the context or pair them with, maybe you can find someone in the team and organization and, you know, I don't have a better expression, but kill two birds with one stone.
Exactly. You have your higher task relevant mature person actually now being having to grow by not just doing the task themselves, but grow someone else to be able to do the task like them. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's the whole point. You're a multiplier as a manager of the team. Your goal is not to be a superhero of the team, but a multiplier. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
What I'll do is I'll put some in the show notes, a few links to the book and a few other articles that might be helpful for you to digest some of this if you want to go deeper on the topic.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. That was super timely, I think, in today's high pressure era where we need to balance execution and efficient delegation. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be back doing our podcast in season 3.
Yeah, see you in the next episode where we will tackle a similarly exciting engineering leadership problem. See you, folks.
Cheers, folks.